Hey guys, welcome to CoET. In this video, we are going to create this simple calculator using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript with a few functionalities such as addition, subtraction, division, and multiplication. So let's display how the calculator is going to work, then we begin development. Okay, so if I come and input any number and then apply the function, then it's going to calculate. Okay, so we can clear, subtract, clear. We can even add multiple numbers and delete single number. Okay, so to begin the development, firstly we are going to create our project folder. So I'm going to create mine at my desktop. You can create yours at any directory. So I'm going to create my project folder and I'm going to call it calculator. Okay, next I'm going to open my favorite text editor and then add my project folder to my workspace. The next thing I'm going to do is create a new file, save, and I'm going to name this file as index.html. This is going to be my HTML file. Okay, so let's begin the HTML aspect of the project. So I'm going to give it a title, simple calculator. Okay, next in the head I'm going to add the CSS file and the JavaScript file that we are going to create also. So for the CSS, I'm going to create a file and call it star.css. So I have to link it first and then save. In the same directory of the HTML, I'm going to create a new file and name it star.css. Okay, you notice that the same name I gave this file is the same name that actually name our CSS file. Okay, so they have to be the same. And the next thing I'm going to do is create the JavaScript file. So before creating that, I will just link it to our HTML code. So I'm going to create it as script.js. Okay, and after that I'm going to create the JS file in the same directory as the HTML file. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to create a container div. Okay, in this div we are going to give it an ID container, and in our container div we want to have our form tag, and in this form tag we are going to have our input fee. So this input fee, we are going to give it the name screen because it is going to be the screen of what is going to display all of those calculation we are going to be doing. So let's give you an ID screen, and we can give this name form. Next, we are going to have the table. In this table, we are going to create the buttons. Okay, so what we want to do is create our first table row, tr, and in the tr tag we have the td. So now in each td tag is going to be the button. Okay, have 9. You just copy and duplicate. Like this. Okay, let's save and then open in our browser. Okay, so for now we have something like this. We are going to add more buttons and then modify it. So on each row, notice that on each row we have 4 buttons. Okay, so we are going to add, okay, we have the 4 buttons already on our first row. So the first button is 9, the second button is 8, here is 7, and the last is clear. Okay, so let's copy this row and duplicate. Okay, so at the end of the second row we have delete. So this is 6, the next button is 5, the next is 4, and the last button on the second row is the delete. For the next row, the first button is 3, the second is 2, we have 1, and the last button is plus. Okay, let's copy the row again and duplicate. Now on this row, the first button is 0, the second is dot, there is /, and the last is minus. Okay, now the last row, on the last row we just have 2 buttons, so we are going to remove these 2 and maintain these 2. Okay, so the first button is equal and the second button is X, which basically will be for the multiplication. So let's save and see what we have for now. Okay, so let's add some functionalities. So for the button, how it's going to work is we are going to actually create a value for each button, and we are going to add function to them so that if we click and then a certain thing can happen. Okay, so we are going to add value to this button, which is going to be 9, and then we add the JavaScript on click function. And then we add the JavaScript on click event, and in this event we are going to and next we are going to add the JavaScript on click event, and then we pass in our function that we are going to create in our script. So we are going to create a function index, and then we pass in the attribute 9. Okay, so that means this button has a value of 9. So if we click this button, then it's going to call this function and then pass 9 as the argument. Okay, so let's do the same for the rest of the buttons. So this is 8, this is 7, and this is for the clean. For the clear, we are not going to add a value. We are just going to add a new function, and we are going to call this clear. Okay, then we repeat the previous process for the rest of the buttons with the numbers. So this is 6. We pass the value 6, and in the insert function we pass 6 as the argument. The next is 5. Four. I'm just going to continue the same thing for the rest of the button. Now for the delete button, we do not need value, so we are just going to pass a function. Okay, so on click, and then we pass our delete function. So this is delete 2, one, and then plus. For the operators, we are going to do the same as we are doing for the numbers. Okay, so this is plus. So for this, we are going to pass a string because it is not an integer. So we are going to pass the plus sign as a string. Okay, this is 0. For dot, we are going to pass the value as dot, and in our function we pass dot as a string. Okay, because it is not an integer as those numbers. So we repeat the same thing for the rest of the operators. So this is /, which is going to represent division. This is subtraction. And for the equal, we are going to pass the equal sign as the value, and then we are going to call a different function, which is going to be equal. We are going to create a function called equal in our script. Okay, and then for the last button, which is x, this is going to represent the multiplication. So we are going to pass the asterisk as the value, and then we pass the same asterisk as the insert argument. Okay, so now let's go to our start sheet and begin modifying the calculator. Okay, but before that, we are going to give these two buttons some attributes. So this, for the equal button, let's give it this ID, eq button, btn, so that based on this ID we can modify this button. Okay, and for the multiplication button, say mod button. Okay, so next, let's go to our start sheet, and then firstly for the body tag, we want to set the margin as 0 and the padding 0. Okay, the next element we want to modify is the container. Okay, and it has an ID called container, so we are going to say hashtag container. And then for the container, let's set the weight as 350, the height as 450 px, margin auto, top 100 px, bottom 0, right 0. So we want to display all of the items within the middle. Okay, right 0, left 0. And then we want to set the background to blue. Let's set the border radius to 5 px. Then box shadow, you want to put some shadow effect on this container, so this is 0 px, 2 px, 4 px, and 2 px. And then we set the position to relative. Okay, so let's refresh our browser to see what we have for now. Okay, so we have something like this. So we have this container in the almost the middle. So let's continue starting the rest of the elements. The next thing we want to modify is the screen. Okay, so this is what is going to be displaying all of the calculations that we are going to be doing. So remember that it has an ID screen. So to modify, we are going to use the hashtag attached with the screen. Okay, so let's set the weight of this 313 px, the height to 100 px, and then the background color, we are going to set it to something like almost the color of a calculator. Okay, so let's see. Okay, like gray like. So for the color of the text within the screen, we want to set it as black. Okay, next, the font size of those numbers that are going to be displaying on the screen, let's set it at 60 px. And then the padding 0.5. Let's set the margin auto, top 10 px, position absolute, left is 0, and the border radius 3 px. So for the border itself, let's add the weight of 8 to 5 px. And then we want to set the star inset, and then let's give it the color. So let's see. Okay, so we have something like this. All right, the next thing we want to begin modifying is the table, which holds all of the buttons. So we say table. Okay, so we are going to use the table tag as the selector. Okay, margin auto, set the top 150 px weight, 250 px, and the position relative. So we just want to add some modification on our calculator before we begin implementing the JavaScript functionalities for the calculations. Okay, so next is the button. So we use the button tag as the selector because we want for this modification to be applied on all of the buttons within the HTML. Okay, so let's set the weight as 79 px, the height 50 px, the font weight as bold, and let's set the font size as 18 px, and then the color, the background color is gray. Set the border radius of each of our buttons with 3 px. Border none, we want to remove the border, and then we set little box shadow on each of our buttons. 0, 2 px, 5 px, 0. Okay, so let's see the effect. Okay, so we have something like this. So let's modify the equal button and the multiplication button. Okay, so we added RD to both of them. So let's first begin with the equal button. And for the equal button, let's give it the weight of 245 px. Okay, and let's override the default weight of all of the buttons. Next, set the position as absolute. Font size 40 px, and let it float at right. The next button we are going to modify is the multiplication button. Okay, hashtag our ID, and then for this, let's load this as left to left, and then this to right. So let's save and see what we have now. Okay, so for this, let's move it to the left, to the right, actually 255, 52 px, and see. Okay, perfect. So let's work on our screen a bit. So let's inspect the screen to see. Okay, So write 0. Okay, so you can actually use the inspect tools to debug and modify your HTML element. Okay, so let's go to our screen and then I'll write 0. Okay, so the modification is okay. Now the next thing we want to do is to implement all of those functionalities. So next we are going to go into our JavaScript file. So in our JavaScript file, the first thing we are going to do is to implement all of our functions. Okay, so the first function we want to create. Okay, so in our JavaScript file, we want to implement all of the functions. So the first function we are going to implement is the insert function. Okay, so here's the insert function. So if we click any number, then it's going to call this function insert, and in this function we pass an argument. Okay, so here let's have the function parameter none. Okay, so if we click any button, then it's going to call this function and it's going to pass in this parameter. Okay, so the next thing we want to do, is to pass the value of whatsoever number that we are going to click into the screen. Okay, into this input. All right, so we say document dot form dot screen dot value. Okay, so this is going to be equal to document dot form dot screen dot value plus whatsoever we are passing in the function. So that means any button that we click. Okay, because in our HTML, for example, if we click 9, then we are going to call this insert function and pass 9. Okay, so we are going to add that value that we are passing into the function at the end. Okay, we close this. So let's save, then refresh. Okay, so if we click 9, then what we did is we pass in the value onto the screen. Okay, so 8 then is going to be displayed on the screen. Okay, so the next function we are going to implement is the equal function. Okay, and the equal function, we call it in the equal button. Okay, so if we click the equal button, then it's going to call this equal function, and the equal function we are now passing in any parameter. Okay, so we are going to implement our function without parameter. Now in our equal function, what we are going to do is to get the actual value into this, because remember that this is an input. Okay, and we inserted a value into this input based on what we click. Okay, so now if we click equal, what we want to do is to get what we already have on our screen and then execute them. Okay, so that can be the addition, the multiplication, whatsoever thing we have in our screen, we want to get them and then execute them. So that is what we are going to implement in our equal function. Okay, so firstly, let's declare a variable called result, and we are going to equal this to what we have in our screen input. Okay, so that is form screen dot value. We get the value of what we have on the screen and then store it into this variable. So now what we want to do, if, let's check if result, okay, then we want to say document dot form dot screen dot value equal and then we use the JavaScript inver function to execute. Okay, so why are we going to execute the result? Okay, so for an example, if we click 9, okay, let's refresh because we have not yet implemented the functionality for clear and delete. So for example, if we click 9 button, then it's going to insert 9 into the screen input, right? If we click plus, it's going to insert plus. Okay, if we click 7, okay, so now if we click equal button, what it's going to do, what we are doing in the equal function is we are actually getting the value from the screen input and then insert it into this variable result. Now we check if this return true, then we are going to execute whatsoever operation we have displaying on the screen, okay, and display it back on the screen. All right, so before that, let's check the HTML, and we have to remove the type of the input. All right, so now let's go in our browser, refresh, and then execute one operation. Okay, 9 plus 7. Okay, so it's going to do the calculation and then display it back onto the screen. Okay, so the next function we want to implement is the clear function, okay, to delete every single number on the screen. Okay, so it's a function clear. Okay, and we are not passing any parameter in the clear function, so we just declare the function as it is. So this, what I want to do, we just want to empty the screen. Okay, so we say document.form.screen.value, and then we set this to an empty screen. All right, so how it's going to work is when we click some buttons and those numbers are displaying on the screen, we click the button clear. When we click clear, then it's going to call this clear function, and what this clear function is going to do, it is going to set the screen value as an empty screen. All right, and an empty screen is just nothing. So basically it's going to remove all of the digits that are displaying on the screen. Okay, so let's refresh, and then we can write some numbers, and then okay, let's check. Clear. So we have document.form.screen.value equals empty screen. All right. Okay. Okay, let's check our function. Okay, we use clear. Probably this might be a reservoir in JavaScript, so let's change it to clean. Okay, go and refresh, and then we have some digits. Okay, and clear is going to remove all of the digits that will display on the screen. Okay, so now what if we have many numbers, but we want to delete just a single number? Okay, Now we are going to implement the delete function to delete number by number. All right, so now let's implement our delete function. So the function is del. So we have our function del, and we are now passing in an argument, so we just implement it as it is. So firstly, we are going to create a variable, and we are going to call this delete. All right, okay, and we want to, let's get the current value on the screen. And the next thing we are going to do is to make some changes on the current value on the screen, and then display it back to the screen. So let's set the screen value to read.subscreen. Okay, 0. So we want to delete some of the values from the current digits that are displaying on the screen. So we are going to say delete.length, and then let's reduce the length by 1. So each time we click delete, what it's going to do, it will call this function, and in this function we get the current digits that are displayed on the screen, and then insert it into this variable. Next, we are going to get the length of the variable value, and then subtract it by 1. Okay, so whenever we click delete button, what it's going to do, it will call this function. And what is this function doing? In this function, we are getting the current value that are displaying on the screen, and then we store it into this variable. Next, what we are going to do is we are going to trim the length. Okay, so for an example, here we have 5447. Okay, so if we click delete, it's going to get this 547, which is let's say the length is 3. So what we are going to do is to trim the length, we subtract 1. So we are going to remove 7, and will be left with 2, which is 5 and 4. All right, and then after we subtract 1 from the length, then the remaining value, we just display it back onto the screen. All right, so let's check the functionality. So if we have 987, and then if we click delete, okay, it's going to trim the length, delete 1 from the right. Okay, delete is going to remove another one until it can remove everything. All right, so let's check the operation. So we have 9 plus 9 equal 18. Okay, we can clear 8 minus 8 equals 0. Okay, so let's test decimal number 5.4 divided by 1.2. Okay, and then it's going to give our answer in decimal number. All right, 5 times 5, 25. Okay, so that's it. Thanks so much for watching. Kindly like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this.